you think about taking a vacant city council seat if it becomes vacant? And, I was like, what? I said, I mean, she knows me really well. I said, that's not me. I don't, I'm not the council person. No, no, no. Um, and I'm thinking to myself, and I said to her, I'm leaning toward no, but I'm driving home. So I'll call you later. So as I drove home, I started thinking about Joel Osteen and, being called to serve. And I thought about Stacey Abrams, about, when you step out there and lead, step out there, do something bold and lead. So by the time I got home, I was thinking, maybe I should say yes. And so I asked my family, and they were like, yeah, we're really excited. So I called Renee back and I said, you're not going to believe this, but I'm actually, I'm willing to throw my name in. I still never knew that. And I guess Councilmember Sittenfeld had asked Renee about, different people he could appoint. And Councilman Wendell Young was working with him on that. So I thank both of them, because they ended up saying, they ended up choosing me. And, and so March 18th, I was sworn into City Council. And as you know, that's about the time of the shutdown. The stay-at-home orders were starting then. And so everything, everything's been really different. So people have said, how do you feel serving at a time when, all this stuff is happening, and now, protests are going on? But, I feel excited and honored, and I'm really happy to have something to offer. So I'm happy to be on City Council. And I just, I want people to know it's really an honor to serve. And I've met so many great people in our city, before and after and during. So anyway, so thank you for having me. That's my little intro. So let's talk about the protest, because that's really why you're here. So you see the picture in the background. So that's a picture of the Men in Suits march. There was a march last Saturday, men in suits and women in heels, because in the 1960s, oftentimes people were kind of dressed for these occasions, especially like it happened on Sunday. But, people would get dressed, and everybody would, come out and protest. Not all the time, but there are a lot of pictures where you see marchers, and women are wearing their Sunday best, and men as well. So they had the men in suits, women in heels. They marched from Fountain Square, and it was really hot. I felt bad for the men. They marched from Fountain Square to the courthouse, and at the courthouse, they had a moment of silence that lasted 8 minutes and 46 seconds to show the time that former police officer Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck. And, everybody said it seemed like a really, really long time. If you think about just being silent for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it's a really long time. And that's the time, we had to watch, while someone was actually murdered. The protests that broke out after that across the country, I think are a sign of people wanting real change. I mean, we've come a long way, but I think we can't stop and say everything's okay. There's nothing more we can do. And a lot of people said, well, why are they doing this in Cincinnati? He was killed in Minneapolis, but the movement is really about everybody joining together. It's not just in one city or one place, because it's happened all across the country. We had a lot of Black men killed here in Cincinnati, up through 2001. And then we had the protests here, and we had the collaborative agreement. We've had a lot of police reform where things have gotten better. But, even Chief Isaac said, we can still do better. We can still do better. And there have been some complaints during the protests as well. So I do want to point out that, and I think everybody sees this, even though I have this picture behind me of, maybe an older crowd. Generally, most of the people protesting are young people in their 20s, and they're multiracial. I mean, it's really beautiful to see. There are people of all different races and backgrounds coming together and standing together peacefully and protesting. And so yesterday, Christopher Smitherman and I, Vice Mayor Smitherman and I, had a motion about the peaceful protesters. And people kept confusing it and saying, oh, why are you asking for charges to be dropped against people who are rioting and looting? And those are not the people that we're talking about. And so there are different groups. There are people who are out there peacefully protesting. You saw more than 4,000 on the square on last Sunday. The only time there was any incident was when someone got sick in the crowd and needed some help. But there were no arrests. There was no violence. And so I wanted to emphasize that, people are out peacefully protesting. When I first started visiting the protests, and so that was maybe a day or two after they started, there were some young people standing on park benches, and they had about 1,000 people gathered around them. And the young woman her name is Nature Brooks, said, everybody, we've had such a great day. It's been peaceful. We haven't had any, incidents. It's been great that some of you are picking up trash as you're walking along, because we're not here to make a mess. We're here to really make our point. And then other people stood up and said, we're not going to meet violence with violence. We're here to talk about reform. We're here to talk about stopping racism. We're here to make changes, and we're not here to be violent. We're not looting. We're not hurting people or property. We're here to make our point, and we're going to make it non-violently, and we're going to stick with that because we are against violence. And so, I thought, wow, this is what we teach our young people. Be the change you want to see in the world. You be the change, but do it peacefully, do it non-violently. Stand up for what you believe in. This is what we teach our young people. And so that's what these young people were doing. And I thought, wow, the city, as a step toward reconciliation, should really reach out to these young people who are advocating change through nonviolence and say, we're going to drop the curfew charge. Some of them were arrested, as you know, there were like 533 arrests for curfew violations. We're going to drop the charges against those of you who were peacefully protesting, just exercising your First Amendment rights. Those of you whose only violation is you broke the curfew, but you were being peaceful. It's just a step forward so that we can start working together and start moving this conversation forward. And then Vice Mayor Smitherman called me and he said, I'm working on the same thing. Let's just put our motions together and just have one motion. And so we did. And even though there was a lot of discussion about it, we did meet with the city solicitor's office as well, because, it's really their choice what charges they bring. We came up with some compromises, dismissing the charges, but waiver of liability against the city, because the solicitor's office job is to protect the city, and they're worried about lawsuits, of course, and several other things. So the motion passed yesterday, 7-4, 2 against. So I was really happy about that. I do want to, a little bit later, I talked about we weren't out there supporting the rioters and looters, and we're not. That's just wrong. I tell people these businesses are how people support their families. Like, you just do not have a right to go into a business and start tearing it up. You just don't have that right. You're really hurting, everyday people who are, just trying to live like everybody else. But I do want to talk about the rioters and looters a little bit later. I also wanted to, let me bring up a screen here, because I know Bill said I can share it, and I think Alice has me able to share. I wanted to talk about Black Lives Matter for a minute, because a lot of, you see the slogans, and people say, well, don't all lives matter? And I just want people to understand that all lives do matter, but that's kind of not the point. The point is that Black lives are in danger, and so that's why there's a Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, not because other people don't matter. Every life matters. I think, that should be just a given. Every life matters. But so let me tell you a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. So let me see. Okay, so here we go with technology. Okay, let's see if this is gonna work. All right, so I'm here. And Alice and I do this a lot when we're going through our women city club, trying to get things together. All right. Is this up on the screen? Do you guys see a big Black Lives Matter logo? Is that working, or are you looking at my whole computer screen? Let's see.
Yes, it's up.
Okay. Okay, so I was going to give you just a little bit of history about it. So the co-founders are, let me pull I'll pull their picture up first. Okay. Well, that's the logo. All right. But actually what I want to share with you, I want to talk about who founded the organization. So I think I have to stop sharing there. Okay, wait, we're going to get there. I'll be so good at this soon. Okay. So back to my screen, and then I'm picking this graphic, and I think I'm doing the whole screen so you guys can see. Okay. So there are three women who co-founded Black Lives Matter. And they are Patrice Kahn Cullors is the first one. She's an artist from Los Angeles. She's a Fulbright scholar and a New York Times best-selling author. The woman in the middle is Alicia Garza. She's based in Oakland. She's the Special Projects Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance. She describes herself as a queer Black woman. And, you know, as a queer Black woman, she brings attention to the fact that the epidemic of violence against Black people has to be viewed through the lens of race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And then the third person, I hope you can see her because on my screen, she's a little bit blocked. Can everybody see her? Her name is Opal Tometi. She's based in New York. She's Nigerian American. She's a writer, and she's the executive director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And that's a group that was founded, it's BAJI, and it was founded in 2006. And they advocate for immigration rights. For example, they help with family reunification visas for the Haitians who were displaced by the 2010 earthquake. So these three women got together. And so why did they start hashtag Black Lives Matter? And so Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013, and it was in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer. You remember the young man who was eating Skittles and drinking a pop and, you know, actually running home to his, to where his dad lived, just having a, you know, a normal afternoon. And then George Zimmerman followed him and became like a vigilante cop, I guess, is what he would be called. But after George Zimmerman was acquitted, they started the Black Lives Matter Foundation, and it's, you know, it's in the United States now, it's in the UK, it's in Canada. And the mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. And their statement says, by combating and countering acts of violence, creating a space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy, we are winning immediate improvements in our lives. And so I'm going to get off of this screen. What I want to explain is that they're really fighting institutional racism. And so, and that's important. That's an important point to understand. They're fighting institutional racism. They're trying to bring reform. I asked my friend, Renee Mahaffey Harris, who is president and CEO of the Center for Closing the Health Gap, who's actually leading a movement to have institutional racism declared a public health crisis. So I would just say, get her on the schedule to come on. She's going to talk a little bit today about institutional racism, but she'd be a great speaker for this forum to talk about that. She also, the Center for Closing the Health Gap hosts town hall meetings every Saturday at 4 p.m. on Zoom, or you can listen on the phone, or you can listen on the Health Gap's Facebook Live page. And we actually started this, Renee got a lot of folks together, African American Chamber, the Urban League, the medical doctors, Cincinnati Medical Association, and, you know, Baptist Ministers Conference, and so many groups have joined in. Now about 25 women's organizations have joined in. And the point was to have a clearinghouse where people could get information about COVID-19. It's kind of, these forums have continued and actually moderate them. I'm honored to do that. It's so much fun, and just meeting lots of people and hearing comments. But with the protests going on, people want to talk more about the protests and, you know, what's happening with that. So so the forums are still going on Saturday at 4, and you can go to covid19communityresources.com. I'll put it in the chat room. But Renee, I just wanted you to take a few minutes because she's the expert on institutional racism. And when I told her I was going to talk about that, she said, "Oh, I'll come in and listen." And I said, "Wow, you're really the expert. Why don't you come in and talk about it?" So, so Renee, are you able to unmute?
I'm here.
Okay, there you go.
Hear me? Okay.
Take a few minutes and talk about institutional racism.
Well, sure. First of all, I'll talk about health disparities. And health disparities and have persisted in our nation for centuries, but I would say in the last 3 and almost 4 decades as a result of work by Secretary Heckler under the Reagan administration, where she did a study for over 18 months and identified data that said, if you are Black versus being white in America, your health outcomes are going to be worse because of race. Now, the reasons for that don't all land in the place of healthcare systems. They land in the place of all of the quality of life factors that inform how we live every day, from education to employment, to the socioeconomic statuses, to health behaviors, to the physical environment and built environment. And so when you think about health in those terms, and then you think about what are the institutions and systems that set policy or oversee or manage those systems and processes that affect our quality of life factors, that's where institutional and structural racism and systemic factors within those systems that started, before we had Civil Rights Act, before all of the acts to really look at the inequities and inequalities. And unfortunately, today, even with all those laws, we still see inequality, injustice in economics, in housing, in transportation, in education, and all of the basic quality of life factors that we live every day. And so COVID-19 put a bigger lens to that, with the data saying, wow, why are there alarming rates of Black people in particular having a disproportionate impact from COVID-19? Immediately, Dr. Fauci, in one of his briefings, said, it's health disparities. How do we solve that? We haven't solved it yet, but clearly we need to have a bigger focus and lens on it. And so now, I was listening to MSNBC 2 days ago, and one of the anchors in the evening said, I remember when I heard institutional and structural racism. When I heard those words, it made me uncomfortable. I will say that he was a white reporter, but he said it made me uncomfortable because it made me feel as though you're saying I'm a racist. And so what he said was, I now understand from seeing COVID-19, from seeing what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on, I now understand that that's an institution and system that we can't just say we are opposed to unjust acts and unjust and inequalities across our spectrum of quality of life. But now I understand what a policy and a culture and system and structure could look like that supports racism. And so I hope that definition, which wasn't exactly a definition, but that description of institutional and structural racism. I know that Christ Cathedral has had, through the TAP lecture series, some phenomenal speakers, including Kendi Abram, who talked about anti-racism. And that is a big part of, I think, the conversation and movement forward, which is making racism a public health crisis and understanding that public health are all the quality of factors of life that we live every day, from having clean and good water that doesn't have disease in it, to the air quality, to where we live, to having food deserts or not having food deserts, and to the economic disparity that we are seeing being detrimental to the Black community and brown communities of our nation.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And everyone, after we've finished this part of the program, I'm hoping we can open it up and have a great discussion about all of this. So Renee's going to stick with us. Susan Noonan was asking me a question about, I guess, going toward the collaborative agreement. You mentioned about different groups working together. It's in the chat, but that reminded me I should mention the collaborative agreement. Everybody knows, it grew out of the protests in 2001 after about 15 Black men were killed in a row by the Cincinnati police, ending with Timothy Thomas. And I think officially started 2002. And then the court, and it was under, out of federal court in Susan DeLotte's courtroom, and she ordered it in place until 2008. So it officially ended in court in 2008, but there was an agreement for everybody to voluntarily continue with the reforms. And, I could see reforms in my neighborhood, which is Avondale, where, officers were more involved in the neighborhood. And, I think a lot of positive things came out of that. They also had the Citizens Complaint Authority. There were complaints that it was underfunded. They were supposed to review complaints within 90 days and just didn't have the staff for that. But you saw that Mayor Kearney was meeting with some of the protesters actually this week, and also with some of the community activists, and he's promising more funding for that. And the Complaint Authority met on Monday, and I think sounds like they're reorganizing and re-energizing. And so that's going to be positive as well. So anyway, so now I should say a lot of parties, Iris Rowley and Reverend Damon Lynch III, Al Gerhardstein, are working with the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, and that's David Singleton's. It heads that group to get the collaborative refresh. So they're looking at what's worked, what hasn't worked, different reforms we still need to make. So that's in process now. Before we open this up for discussion, so I wanted you all to look at this video, which was really, I'll just be honest, it was eye-opening for me, because ever since these protests started, I've been hugely supportive of the folks who are out there peacefully protesting, and super, super critical of people who are looting and rioting. I still don't condone looting and rioting, but understanding it is different than condoning it. And so someone sent me a video of this young lady kind of talking about, have we thought about why people do this? And I really hadn't. I thought, oh, it's just an opportunity. You go into a store and you grab some stuff that's so ridiculous, that's crazy. But her video, you might not agree with it, but I just wanted people to hear it, because I think it's really important that as we, work together, that we understand different viewpoints, whether we agree with them or not. And I can tell you, her language, if you have gentle ears, it could be offensive. I have really done my best to bleep out the words. You can still kind of see what she's saying, but I have tried to make it so, that it's not, so that you can still hear like the first consonant of the word. But I asked one of our tech people at the Herald, can you bleep out all the curse words? Because I really want to show this, but, I eventually want to show it in City Hall. I don't think they're ready for it yet, though. So I'm going to show it to you first. Okay, so if you can just sit back for 5 minutes, listen to what this young lady has to say. Her name is Kimberly Jones, and she's written a book. I think it's called I'm Not Dying. I haven't read her book, but let me pull this up for you. And then let's open it up and talk. Okay, how's that? Is that good? Let's see if I can. I think I'm getting better at this. Okay, we're gonna pull her up on the video.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters, and the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why. And that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need? And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa, that was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give up. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. when we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so your target, your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this to the ground and it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
Amen.
They're lucky that Black people are.
Okay, everybody take a breath. Are you all still with me? All right, so I wanted you to see that just as, you know, just as part of the conversation, because, you know, what she's talking about is institutional racism. That's really what she's talking about. She's talking about the whole system. And that's what the protests are about. It's about the whole system across the country. It's not just about, you know, one thing that happened. So that's my intro. And I hope that gives everybody, is everybody still here? I guess because you're all on mute, I don't hear anybody breathing. I think it's a really hard video for me to watch, and I've seen it about 4 or 5 times now. You can probably also understand why I haven't shown it in City Hall yet. I'm thinking, I don't know if they're ready for this, so maybe we're not there yet. But you know, I do think her voice needs to be heard too. I want people to you know, understand, you know, the range of voices and viewpoints about everything. So, okay, well, let's open it up. Can you guys unmute, and is everybody allowed to make comments or ask questions?
Sure.
How you feel about the protest? I'd like to know how's everybody feeling about the protest? What do you think?
Okay, so one at a time though. You can unmute yourself, and also you can put something on the chat. So let's just go one at a time.
This is Karen Montagna. I had an opportunity, I guess you would call it an opportunity, to go to 2 of the protests. I went to the one earlier in the day before the looting happened. I was back at home. When it gets dark downtown, I usually go home. I was sad about the small business owners. I was sad about that. But they were peaceful, and I noticed that they were, as I think you said, Michele, that they were young people that were doing a lot of the. Some people came too, but other people came too and joined. But it felt like the leaders were young people, and I note that in many of the moments of change, it's the young people and often the women, South Africa and other places, that create and stimulate the change. And so I'll end by saying I appreciated hearing your explanation of the suits and heels, because I was wondering about that. I was wondering like where that came from, and you made me remember that when I was a child, you know, Martin Luther King mostly was wearing, all those people were wearing suits and dresses and that kind of thing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
So we have a couple comments on chat from Quentin Jefferson. Powerful video. The news seems to focus on policing, but not about the larger issues. And then we have a question from Beth. Jan, could you discuss the recommendations of the OJPC, Ohio Justice Policy Center, in more detail?
Yeah, there's a, so to Quentin, I would say, yeah, so police reform has been, you know, because of course everything kind of sparked when George Floyd was murdered. So police reform has been the rallying cry, but people are talking about a lot more than that. Cincinnati, I think, is ahead in terms of police reform, but there still are a lot of complaints here. And so we still have, you know, we still have work to do here as well, but you're right. And I think, as, you know, Renee was pointing out, when you start talking about, reform and, economics, education disparities. One thing that, was really telling, of course, COVID-19, as Renee has said, has shown, really showed people what the health gap, and others have been saying, forever. We've got health disparities, we've got health disparities. And then there's also, there are environmental issues. For example, I think Hamilton County has one of the higher incidents of asthma in the country, but definitely Avondale has one of the highest rates of asthma in the county. And so, why is that? So what's going on? You have to look at, where the landfills are, and so I mean, there's a lot to look at. Economic opportunity, educational disparities. It was really horrible when the schools closed, and then we heard there were thousands of kids that teachers couldn't get in touch with because they didn't have computers, so they couldn't do their work online. They couldn't take advantage of the online classes, and they couldn't even really be found. And even though the CPS did a great job about getting computers to people who didn't have them, there still was a problem of, if you take that computer home, do you have the internet? And so that's something that's being worked on now. And I know Children's Hospital is working with Cincinnati Bell and some others to make sure that every child in CPS, and then they're trying to expand to other schools, but that every student has access to the internet, which will be huge. That'll be great for our community, because people without that connectivity really, really miss a lot. And the second question was about the reforms. Okay, let's see if I'm going to see if I can pull them up for you on the screen real fast. Okay. Okay, hold on. Let's see how I do with this. I know they're in a notebook somewhere on my computer. Oh, I'm doing the wrong. Oh no, I'm not. Screen share. Okay, let me see if I can find them. Okay. I'm spending so much time. I should have had these ready for you. Let's see. Maybe, oh, here they are right here. I think OJPC. Okay, can you all see this? Can everybody see this? Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
That's a yes, okay. All right, so here is, so OJPC, not OJPC, but Cincinnati Black United Front, OJPC had a press conference on Thursday at City Hall, and they were talking about the kind of reforms. This is coming out of the collaborative agreement refresh. So, and I can leave this document with you. There must be a way. I guess I could just email it to you, Bill. Will that work out? I mean, I'll go through it here real fast, and then I can email it to you so that everybody can see it. Is that okay?
That would be good, yeah.
Okay. I'll just email this to you. So these are the recommendations. Number one was apply laws and policies fairly to all people, eliminate racial disparity in the criminal legal system, including arrest, convictions, and sentencing. Black folks are arrested at this is nationally, 10 times the rate of white people. There was a young lady that I spoke to who was one of the protest organizers. And, I can tell you with the different protests on different days, there are different people organizing. So there isn't just one person. So you have to kind of find out, okay, well, who's organizing today? Who's in charge of this today? But one day there was a young lady, and I said, well, have you personally had any problems with the Cincinnati police? And she said that she's lived in Cincinnati for 6 years, and she told me she had been pulled over 12 times. I don't know if all 12 times were by the Cincinnati police, because they're different police departments. And I'm not saying they're the ones, but, it might've been Norwood, it might've been Springdale, there might be some others as well. But she said in the 6 years that she's lived here, she's been pulled over 12 times. And she felt most of those times she was spoken to in a disrespectful manner. So, and basically she ended up saying she feared for her life. So, I don't know much about that, except that, that is something that people have to be aware of. The second thing was offer warnings first and problem solve for constructive creative solutions. The whole thing about giving citations instead of arrests, all those people were arrested, curfew violators, for example, and then, unfortunately taken to the Hamilton County Justice Center, but they had to be processed to go in, and so they were outside for a long time. A lot of them said they were handcuffed. I don't have time to show you this video, but there was a young lady who was talking about her experience there. And, you know, she said people were using the bathroom on themselves, you know, folks who were on their period, you know, women on their period couldn't get personal care items. There just wasn't, you know, there just wasn't enough preparation for that. So maybe a citation instead of arresting them would have helped. The Hamilton County sheriffs just weren't ready. They weren't ready for that number of people to come in at once. And also there should have been a way of, you know, if you do have to arrest that many people, which is, you know, questionable in the first place, but, you know, have a place indoors where they can come. I know, like the police academy during the Occupy Cincinnati arrests, when they were arresting people for criminal trespassing, it was in October, and they took them inside to a place where they could wait while being processed, which is much better. So, but anyway, the whole thing about, you know, give people citations as opposed to arresting them if they're doing something nonviolent, why, you know, drag them down there. So, and then, oh, and this is cite and release. That's actually number 3. So that's what I was just talking about. And then address the pandemic as an issue of public health, not of criminality. You know, the whole stay-at-home order was really difficult for a lot of people. And, you know, I was just thinking, thank goodness it wasn't in the summertime, where a lot of people in the city don't have air conditioning and, you know, kind of have to come outside. I mean, you can't just, so, I mean, there's a lot, you know, there are a lot of changes we can make. Another one, number 5, ensure that the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County drop charges for violation of 3701.352. And that was for the social, that's the social distancing rule. And that kind of goes back to what they were saying earlier. You know, during a pandemic, these rules are made, these laws are made, but how they're enforced should be rethought. You know, people are there in a health crisis, not because they're committing a criminal act. And then it says revive the Citizen Complaint Authority and the City Managers Advisory Group. I hear the Citizens Complaint Authority, as I said, they met on Monday. The mayor has dedicated money to them. There have been complaints it's not enough money, but you know, we're about to hit the budget process next week, so we'll see how that goes. I don't think the Managers Advisory Group has been revived, and both of these came out of the collaborative agreement. So part of the refresh is to get them going again. And then look at the use of force policies. I can just tell you that we had complaints. So there are two sides, 3 or 4 sides really to every story. But one complaint of some of the protesters was that, you know, there was pepper spray and tear gas while they were being peaceful. The chief told me that, you know, maybe some people were being peaceful, but if tear gas was used, it was when somebody wasn't being peaceful. So there's some debate. I just said, you know, there's some debate about that, but that's something that will be looked into. We'll see. And I always tell our chief, you know, I really love him to death. I think he's really, you know, there's a lot to do, and he's, I think he's a really good leader. I mean, he's all about reform and making things better. And I really, really appreciate his work. I mean, he's working so hard, and he was out there. He took a knee with the protesters because they asked him to. You know, he and the other officers were hugging a lot of them. I mean, you know, he's from our community, and you know, he's here from Cincinnati, and really, really cares about our city. So, you know, but doesn't mean, I mean, none of us are perfect. You know, we all have to get better. And so as a leader, he's got to help his force to get better. And then number 8, improving policing data collection, you know, which is another thing, including tracking by race. Even with like COVID-19, you know, we were asking for, you know, the racial data, and our health commissioner, Dr. Moore, really pushed for that. She was saying that a lot of times, I guess because it's an emergency, you know, people are sick, they don't get the data, but those who are collecting that information, it's just easy to check that off, unless people say they don't want to tell. But she really is pushing those who are doing the intake, you know, get the data. We really need the data for the future. So those are the 8 recommendations, and I think that might be it. So these are just a lot of people who signed on for this. So OJPC and Cincinnati Black United Front. So there we go. But I will give this to Bill. I'll email this to Bill so that all of you can see it. But those are the recommendations. Okay, so let me stop the screen share. I'm just loving the Zoom. Okay.
Jen, Michelle,
Yes.
a question I had, one of the national issues that's being debated right now is often under the term of defunding police departments. Now that's kind of a really emotional phrase that I don't know whether that's a helpful one, but the way some people have explained it is redefining the role of the police. And I think we've made some steps, like in mental health and things like that. I'm not sure whether we're all the way there here in Cincinnati or not, but we have made some steps, have we not?
Yeah, so the police end up doing a lot of work that really falls under human services. And so, I think the issue is maybe some of that funding should go to some of those organizations who are actually doing that work. And so there is debate and discussion about that. I think as we go through the process next week, I hope everybody knows that the public comment times are June 16th and June 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. in person at Duke Energy Convention Center. Also, there's an option of registering on Zoom, but I want to say at Duke Convention Center, they are social distancing, and my understanding is they're only allowing in 300 people. And my understanding is when 300 get in, then no one else can come. So I don't know if people have to register in advance for that or not. I was just telling someone else I need to check in. I actually haven't checked my email today or the Cincinnati website to see where we are with that. But what I'm saying in that area is I'm really looking forward to the different agencies and the public coming in and just talking about that, because the whole defunding thing, and some people are saying get rid of the department completely. That's not going to happen, but
It shouldn't.
Yeah. But in terms of how the funds are spent, I don't know what's going to happen there either. I have no idea what's going to happen with the funds. And I know the budget was released today, and honestly, I haven't even had a chance to download it. But we do need to hear from everybody and then put all that information together.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that you mentioned that we have come a long way, and Bill, the Cincinnati Police have really come a long way since 2002, and some of the programs that they've implemented with the mental health training and social workers working with police officers, the new Divert program, which is Women Helping Women, they go out on every domestic violence call, and they're making, Chief Isaac is really making an effort, and other chiefs have before him, to implement a lot of reforms. When you have a department of over 1,000 people, and they're out on the streets everywhere, it's hard sometimes to keep track of each person, and so the chief has to depend on his supervisors. And I think some of the supervisors aren't always keeping track of what everybody's doing. It's like any profession, you might have bad apples, but I think overall that that Cincinnati Police Department is way ahead of a lot of other police departments. Not to say that they can't still do a lot better, but they have implemented quite a few programs that are female and minority oriented to help the community and people with disabilities. So, I just wanted to throw that out. Not that I'm saying there's not room for improvement, but they have made some. Thanks.
They have made some, I think things are a lot better than they were in 2001. But, just keeping in mind in 2001, a lot of the protesters weren't even born, or they might have been babies.
That's right.
I have to say to them, you don't know what it was like here before. So let's, we're pushing for change, but don't think that some change hasn't happened.
And one
So
of the things Chief Isaac said, and I picked up on this, he was talking to a whole bunch of college students up in Clifton at one of the demonstrations. And he said, what I discovered is that none of the young people even know about the agreement. So they don't know the way it used to be, and they don't know the reforms we've made. And he thinks it's really important to educate young people about the history, maybe in schools, you know, whether it's junior high school or high school, because they don't know that that happened.
right, because, you know, someone said, a few people have said, you know, one thing we need is a citizens complaint authority. And so we said, well, we have one, you know, we
Yeah.
have a citizens complaint authority.
Right.
What we need is money. So, yeah. So to let people know, some of these things are already in place. We just have to revive them and refresh them. So yeah. So, and, you know, other cities, I think, look at Cincinnati and say, you know, what are you all doing? And let's take a look at that collaborative agreement. I understand Minneapolis has contacted us. Reverend Damon Lynch III was on a town hall meeting. Renee might jump in with this one. I think it was, 2 weeks ago. And he said that the Minneapolis, I don't know if it was the mayor or the, you know, police department, whatever, but they had contacted him to ask him to talk to them about the collaborative agreement. So that's great.
Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Jan,
Hello?
Go,
Oh,
go.
hello, Jan
Hey,
Michelle.
Dr. Brown, how are you?
I'm
Hi.
doing very well.
Elizabeth
Uh,
over there on the side. Hey, Elizabeth.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for accepting the offer to serve on City Council. I think you'll be a great addition.
Oh,
And,
thank
hello to everyone else here too. I'd just like to make a quick comment about the video before we pass on, because there is so much there to unpack, and I want you to benefit from every exposure that you could possibly have. I would not have changed a single thing about the video. I would show it in her pure voice, because that is important too. Privileged people, like all of us in on this cast, should be forced to deal with the hard truth. And what you're seeing in that young lady is this pain that George Floyd was talking about when he testified in front of the Congress. Academicians call what you saw her being expressed verbally and visibly post-traumatic slavery disorder. Why should we ask people who are psychologically oppressed to endure that oppression in silence rather than somehow cause a little pain to those of us who are privileged? We're so tender that we can't hear it. We need to hear that. That's one point I want to make about it.
Dr. Brown, can I just cut in real fast? I'm going to get it right back to you. So let me
Okay.
say, I actually bleeped it out, not for you guys so much, but I really want to show it in City Hall, and, you know, our council meetings
Okay.
are on television. And
Mhm.
so for that reason, I thought, well, you know, I can't really have this because you can't show that on city cable. So that's why.
All right, but if as
Sanitize
far
it.
as I'm concerned, the people at City Hall need to hear it too. Same thing. But and I'll be quick about this. I was really intrigued by her explanation of the looters and the people who were there with good intentions, the peaceful protesters. It was like a sociological lecture. We need to understand that I would bet that every one of those people who own a small business have access to health care. I would bet that every one of them have a bank account. I would bet that their businesses are located where they are because they're aware of marketing research. They have a captive audience being located in poor communities. The prices are usually higher if you just think of a convenience market, and so on. So those people, whether they see themselves as such, are a part of the exploiting structural system of this country. Another hard reality that we have to face. And if they're good business persons, they all have some business insurance. So what I want us to do, if we're going to be real, if we are going to be a part of the solution, let's have everybody face the hard truth about what this society is. So when we talk about change, we don't want to just integrate people into a dysfunctional system. We have to talk about transform, where we change the system itself. And then I'll quit with this. When we talk about looters, keep this in mind, that our ancestors were a part of the loot that European and European Americans brought from Africa to America. And if you've had an opportunity to visit the African continent, that is still the case. The wealth flows out to the so-called developed part of the world. So we were looted. Thank you for listening to my rant, but this is where I am in the sunset years of my life, and having been abused verbally and otherwise by the policemen on more occasions than I care to take the time to tell you about now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I appreciate that. And you know, you have so much, you know, so much history to teach us, and I know you've done, you know, besides your personal experiences, which are just, you know, we always appreciate when you share that, but you've done so much research as well. So thank you for, you know, I've been to a lot of forums where Dr. Brown has been the keynote speaker, and, you know, he's fantastic. So, and of course, Elizabeth Brown with, you know, all her work with housing, housing opportunities made equal. So thank you, both of you. You're great leaders in our community. We appreciate it.
Is your time up now, Jan? Because Lee Meyer has
I've got a minute. So
a minute. Lee, go ahead.
I just wanted to, after listening to the video with the woman speaking, I think the context of her total emotion needs to be better clarified. It's clear to me that she was in Minneapolis and she kept referring to Target, and she was saying an obscenity Target, an obscenity Target. And it's important to realize that, because you wonder why a variety store like that. Target is a major political force in the Twin Cities, especially Minneapolis. They're owned by the Dayton department stores. One of the executives of Dayton has served as mayor of Minneapolis. He's a major political figure. And so when she's saying that about Target, she's striking out at the power center there. Her anger is palpable when you watch that. And I think it helps if you understand the context of it, that she's attempting to strike out to what she sees as the power structure where she is. And we need to honor that. We need to we need to understand it. We need to accept it, because we need to know that although the targets of rage may be different in different parts of this country, the rage is real and it's been earned.
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I really didn't know where she was, and so that's really good information. So I didn't know that about Target or the mayor or anything. So thank you so much. That's great information. So I'm sorry that this is such a great conversation, and I've just enjoyed everybody's feedback, and I really, really appreciate you having me here to listen to me. You know, I hope you'll call me anytime, either, you know, email or by phone, you know, share your comments. I also hope you'll come to the Women's City Club annual meeting, which we moved to June 25th at 6:30 p.m. and you can register. The Women's City Club has sent that out. We're going to talk about, you know, equity. There's so many great topics, really good Zoom discussion. And then afterwards, we're going to have some music and happy half hour where we can sit back and just chat. But that is June 25th. We moved it from the 18th because of the public comment, and so many people involved in Women's City Club want to come to the public comment because they're involved in all these different organizations. So it will be June 25th. It's at 6:30. We're going to open the doors, the Zoom doors, at 6 o'clock. It's going to be fun and inspiring and really fantastic. So please spread the word. And again, Bill, thank you. And Ed's over there too. Thank you so much for having me. I've been to these forums before. I've never been a speaker. So this is like, you know, super exciting and just really enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you for an incredibly thoughtful presentation and very important presentation. We'll have you back very soon.
Thank you. Don't forget Renee Mahaffey Harris, Center for Closing the Health Gap, needs to, you know, she's got so much great information. So it would be good to have a forum with her where she could present a lot of the work she's doing. She's just doing a great job. And she's bringing a lot of groups together in the city, which is pretty amazing, really, really amazing. So thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you.
All right, take care. Stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Any other wish for some discussion before we sign off here?
Bill, can you hear me? This
Yes.
is Don Rucknagel. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
She's left. She asked a question of why the children in Avondale have so much asthma. And I think I know. Do you by chance have her phone number?
I do, but I don't have it in front of me right now. I'll get it to you. Doug.
Okay. If you could leave it on my voicemail, 931-3459. You have a pencil?
Yes. She also has, of course, a city hall number too that you can reach.
931-3459.
Got it.
Okay. We'll be in touch. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Very good to see a lot of you. It's been
We
too long.
probably won't be seeing each other in the flesh for a long time.
And that's coming from a doctor, so you have some wisdom that way. So you're predicting a much longer span where we won't be having live presentations.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said it's coming from a wise doctor like yourself, and it seems like you're projecting that we will have this for quite a few more months.
I'm saying that the virus is such that this business is going to go on for maybe a couple of years. So it's going to be a long time before I perceive, before we're going to be able to have face-to-face meetings.
Well, we're going to become very professional with Zoom. Any other comments?
Yeah, Alice, and I'm bowing out of the web page business.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, I have another solution to the problem of healthcare, so that's another story. But okay, good to talk to you and listen to her. Yeah.
We'll be planning another forum, probably not next week, but 2 weeks from this Thursday.
What will be the topic?
Well, we either will continue this one or possibly get into the city budget, since the city budget has to be passed very soon.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a big article today on today's Inquirer on that too. We'll be in touch. Thanks.
Okay. So goodbye to you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.